Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to look at the history of Indonesia. Today, Indonesia is probably most commonly known around the world for one place, Bali, an exotic and romantic vacation spot. So many people view Bali as the representation of Indonesia. But what about the rest of the nation? How did that one island, and the rest that make up the entirety of Indonesia, come to be what they are now? Where did the history of Indonesia begin? Like its neighbor of Malaysia, Indonesia can trace its first signs of modern human life all the way back to about 40,000 years ago, although there is also archaeological evidence suggesting that 40,000 years may be an underestimate and other ancestors of today, as humans may have been present in the region as long as 1.9 million years ago. Either way, the earliest reliable evidence of a sophisticated civilization in current day Indonesia dates back to only about 400 BC, with the discoveries of Indian trade goods in the region and inscriptions found in West Java and Eastern. It is also believed that trade with China would have been concurrent with the trade between the Indonesian archipelago and India. Commerce with these particular foreign nations would have also brought the religions of Buddhism and Hinduism to the islands, beginning or contributing to the outside influence on the region. Jumping ahead to the 7th century, the powerful trader Srivijaya Empire originating from the island of Sumatra flourished from the Malay Peninsula down to Java. Despite their remarkable success over multiple centuries, the Buddhist empire of Srivijaya faced its decline after the Chola Empire from India seized their Sumatran territory of Palembang and apprehended King in 1025. From that point on, the Srivijaya Empire essentially collapsed, making room for the Hindu Kingdom of the Majapahit Empire. Founded in 1292, the Majapahit rose to dominate the modern-day Indonesian region, prospering through trade as the Srivijaya Empire had done before them. Still, just as their predecessors, the Majapahit Empire hit a wall and began a rapid downfall. Theirs came after the death of one of their leaders, Gojamara, in 1364, and the following death of the king, Haim, in 1389. Leading up to this time, the Islamic faith found its way to the archipelago and began to really take hold over the ensuing centuries. Many different lesser-known sultanates found success throughout the islands as a result, some even outlasting the dominion of the Majapahit, such as the Sultanate of Demak and Banyumas. By the late 15th century, the Portuguese had arrived in the region and explored the islands of the Indonesian archipelago, while Spain did attempt to exert some dominance in the Maluku Islands, also known as the Spice Islands. Their authority in any part of Indonesian archipelago was short-lived due to contesting efforts of Portugal and, later, the Dutch and British. The Portuguese were initially triumphant in the Malay Peninsula, capturing Malacca in 1511. From there, they aimed their sights towards the Spice Islands, beginning their bid to take control of the spice trade. And while they had some levels of success, they were fairly quickly pushed out through the arrival of the Dutch by the 17th century. In terms of the colonial powers, the Dutch were surely the most prominent intruder into the Indonesian islands. The first Dutch expedition set off for the archipelago in 1595, under the command of Cornelius de Houtman, and dropped anchor at the shore of West Java. Around this time, the Dutch East India Company was formed in order to control trade between the Dutch Republic and the nations throughout the Indian Ocean. The Dutch East India Company was given a significant amount of autonomy by the Dutch government, allowing them to dominate trade throughout the East Indies and keep their competitors, notably the British and Portuguese, at bay. While the original focus of the company was to maintain commercial authority and prosperity, they began to shift their attention as they took control of Java and its neighbors. During the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company made a gradual transition from a leading sea and trading power to more of a colonial type, establishment after centering themselves in the fortified port of Jakarta, Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, working to gain more jurisdiction throughout the Indonesian islands. The Dutch East India Company was also able to capture Malacca from the adjacent Malay Peninsula in 1641. When the 18th century came around, though, the company began to struggle with corruption, conflict, and a slow collapse into bankruptcy, which resulted in the Dutch government revoking their charter and seizing all of their possessions in 1799. In 1800, the Dutch East Indies was founded, made up of what would later become Indonesia, but for the time being served as the new Dutch colonial administration in the archipelago. This establishment grew over the 19th and part of the 20th century, although some ups and downs, such as the Jovanese War from 1825 to 1830, ending in a Dutch victory, did exist. Also in 1825, the Dutch captured Palabumbu, former territory of the Srivijaya Empire. During this period, the Dutch also settled disputes and clashes with Aceh, Lombok, and Sulawesi, and continued to expand their dominion. In the course of the Dutch colonization, the people of the Indonesian islands were treated vastly unfairly. As Dutch priorities shifted more towards agriculture, the local farmers were mandated to set aside 20% of their own property in order to grow crops for the Dutch to export, such as pepper, sugar, cinnamon, tea, and coffee and indigo. By the 1870s, the colony moved to a free market system and began to form private plantations, although the local people were still not truly treated justly. Finally, at the very start of the 20th century, the Dutch installed the new system in order to promote the welfare of the archipelago's locals, known simply as the ethical policy. This new program brought about changes such as the construction of new schools in the region, government reforms that allowed more autonomy for the local officials, and the opportunity for some of the indigenous people to become more educated and learn more about the Western world. Even with these improvements, though, not every local was impacted, and therefore many people on the island still felt oppressed by the colonial authority. Over time, these feelings of resentment culminated in nationalist movements and push for ultimate independence. Unfortunately for the people of the archipelago, the fight for freedom was swiftly interrupted by the intrusion of the Japanese during World War II. At first, the locals were not completely displeased by what they saw as a liberation from their Dutch oppressors. When the Japanese occupation of the region began, they were quick to win favor from the Indonesian people by doing so through their use of natives for administrative positions. Unlike the Dutch and their willingness to support Indonesian nationalists, the successful strategy was only temporary, though, as the Japanese opted to use the Indonesian islands in whatever form best suited them. During the war, which sparked some disapproval from a number of locals,